Tonight's headlines: the big battle. U.S. forces begin to go at Saddam's best. American troops try to save one of Islam's holiest sites during battle. U.S. brass, including White House, defends battle plan and initial troop strength. Also tonight, the SARS scare. An entire jumbo jet is quarantined as the worldwide death toll rises. The U.S. Supreme Court hears a major affirmative action case. And in a rare move, the court lets you hear it too. And like father, like son, both in the reserves, they may head to war together.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. It's begun. Tonight, U.S. ground forces have started a fight in the biggest challenge yet in their war against Saddam Hussein. They're trying to clear the way to at least Baghdad's close outskirts, and depending on how this new fight goes, maybe beyond in fairly short order. Here are the latest developments. Troops of the U.S. Army and U.S. Marine Corps are engaging Republican Guard ground forces south of the Iraqi capital. The 101st Airborne is in the city of Najaf, where what are believed to be Sunni Muslim fighters loyal to Saddam Hussein are holed up in a shrine sacred to Shiite Muslims. Latest official casualty count: 51 Americans dead, 27 British. Numbers of Iraqi military and civilian deaths uncertain. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld says only unconditional surrender by Iraq will end the war. CBS News correspondents are with U.S. and allied forces on the front lines and at other key locations around the world to bring you comprehensive coverage of the war. We start with David Martin at the Pentagon with tonight's big picture. David?
Dan, the all-out ground offensive against those two Republican Guard divisions south of Baghdad has begun. The aim is to destroy two of Saddam's best divisions and leave Iraq's capital defenseless from the south.
After days of artillery shelling and airstrikes against the equipment of the two divisions, General Franks briefed President Bush on the battle plan this morning via a video conference call from his headquarters in Qatar. He is sending the Army's 3rd Infantry Division against the Medina Division of the Republican Guards at Karbala, and the 1st Marine Division against the Baghdad Division at Al-Qut. The Medina Division is now rated at less than 40% combat effectiveness. The Baghdad Division is even worse off, less than 20% combat effectiveness. The Marines think the Baghdad Division is beginning to crack.
We're starting to see a lot more deserters, starting to see people take off their uniforms literally and put on civilian clothes.
This will be the greatest threat yet to the Iraqi regime, which, despite the constant rain of bombs on Baghdad, continues to appear on state television as if still in control. But today, Saddam's message to the people was read by a stand-in, and U.S. officials are suggesting he is already dead.
The fact that Saddam Hussein did not show up for his televised speech today is interesting.
Whether Saddam is alive or dead, the Iraqis continue to fight, and the terrain poses obstacles for an attacker. For the Army, there is the Karbala Gap, and above it a lake held back by a dam which could be blown to flood the gap. For the Marines, there is the Tigris River, and intelligence reports the Iraqis have rigged the bridges for demolition. But the greatest danger lies in crossing the so-called chemical red line the Iraqis have drawn around Baghdad.
I think the red line is in the head of the regime. When he decides that it's all over for him, perhaps that'll be the trigger for him to use chemical weapons.
Whether it's just in the head or actually drawn on a map, the red line is the point at which the Republican Guards are authorized to use chemical weapons in order to save the regime. Dan?
David Martin reporting live from the Pentagon as the battle for Baghdad starts. And we take you now to the battlefield. CBS's Mark Strassman is with lead elements of the 101st Airborne Division. They fought today their way into Najaf, an important city in south-central Iraq, and one where military necessities might collide head-on with religious sensibilities.
American forces now move deep into Najaf, one of the Muslim world's holiest cities. Inside neighborhoods here, troops keep hunting for several hundred of Saddam's violent holdouts. while at the same time trying to win over everyday Iraqis. Coalition forces will face the same challenge in other cities on the march to Baghdad. In Basra, British forces have circled the city, but the fighting goes on and has since the war began 2 weeks ago. U.S. troops in Nasiriyah and the Shiite holy city of Karbala also have faced stubborn resistance, more than expected. That has forced a change in the battle plan, sending coalition troops into Iraqi cities rather than around them. In Najaf, many Iraqis welcome the invading troops, but are still nervous and suspicious. So soldiers are told to smile at the locals, but watch their hands.
Every alleyway, you can make your own targets. There's too many about me to say target 1, 2, 3, 4. Assalamu alaikum.
That approach contrasts with this one. At times, the U.S. is brutally direct. Kill the enemy, destroy his assets. But often, commanders like Colonel Chris Hughes face a clear constraint.
Main effort is to isolate the mosque.
Its gold dome, Najaf's holy shrine tomb of Ali, is sacred to Shia Muslims, Iraq's majority. But inside it, members of the Fedayeen, pro-Saddam paramilitaries, are hiding and launching attacks. Hughes must be methodical and precise.
I don't want us to give any perception that we are, tearing up the holiest city in the Middle East.
Ali, the founder of the Shia branch of Islam, is buried in a cemetery next to the city's central mosque. That cemetery is also a holy site, and the Fedayeen have also been using it as a base and a shield. Gambling U.S. troops won't dare to attack it. In Arabic and in action, the message to Najaf is U.S. forces mean harm only to the Fedayeen. They want to win the military fight and not lose the political war. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Najaf, Iraq.
Major reinforcements for U.S. forces in Iraq are now arriving in Kuwait. They include the first of 30,000 troops of the Army's 4th Infantry Division, along with the first of 30 shiploads of tanks, trucks, and helicopters. The 4th is the high-tech armored division that was supposed to strike Iraq early in the invasion from Turkey in the north until the Turks said no. The plan was canned and changed. With the war now expected by some to take longer than original hopes had outlined, the war plan, including troop strength, faces some questioning. Many of the questions are aimed at the Secretary of Defense, along the lines of, did he or did he not insist on an original invasion force that was too few, too light, and without enough deep backup? CBS News White House correspondent Bill Plant has that story.
Military men in and out of uniform have charged Rumsfeld with overruling requests for enough troops to both take Baghdad and also defend long supply lines. The White House spokesman dismissed it as second-guessing.
I can't explain anything that any unnamed colonel says to a newspaper. There are many colonels out there. One unnamed one happened to say something.
But some of the complaints have been very much on the record. Lieutenant General William Wallace said last week, the enemy we're fighting is different from the one we war-gamed against. Retired Colonel Mitch Mitchell says the Army strongly believes that overwhelming force helps prevent casualties.
If you have more forces that you can bring to bear on your enemy at the beginning of a war, the chances of it ending more quickly are much greater. An extension of the war equates to more U.S. casualties.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs jumped to his boss's defense and called reports that Rumsfeld had delayed signing troop deployment orders bogus.
They're absolutely wrong. They bear no resemblance to the truth. And it's just harmful to our troops that are out there fighting very bravely, very courageously. Every member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff signed up to this plan and the way it was executed.
Myers says that Commanding General Tommy Franks got everything he asked for. There are now about 110,000 U.S. and British troops in Iraq, another 100,000 on the way. And the president has kept his distance from this dispute. Dan?
Bill Plant reporting live from the White House. Authorities in Jordan reportedly have foiled 2 alleged Iraqi terror plots, one to poison water used by U.S. troops there, the other to bomb a hotel popular with Americans. An Iraqi official says, and I quote, completely untrue. 4 Western journalists who disappeared in Baghdad turned up safely today in Jordan. Reporter Matt McAllister and photographer Moises Salman of Newsday and freelance photographers Molly Bingham and Johan Spanner. McAllister said he and Salman had been held and interrogated in an Iraqi prison since last Tuesday. When soldiers are sent to war, their number one wish is to get home again, to return to families alive, and they hope well. And as CBS's Byron Pitts reports, on the modern battlefield, it's often up to the courageous crews of rescue helicopters to make that wish come true.
Within minutes of any battle here, the sounds of bullets and bombs are interrupted with the rumble of an incoming helicopter. For the injured, it is the sound of help, often the difference between life or death.
U.S. Marine and Army helicopter crews go on these rescue missions both day and night. They've divided Iraq into sectors or grids on a map. That means an injured soldier, sailor, or Marine can be airlifted and taken to the nearest trauma center in minutes, not hours.
There have been gunshot victims, shrapnel injuries, amputees. Unlike the troops on the ground, these rescue teams make no distinction between allies or adversaries.
It makes no difference if they're Americans, enemy, or civilians. We're bringing everyone back. We're treating them all as equal.
What allows you to do what you do every day?
God. Hope. Thinking about my life.
On one recent mission, this team of Marines and Navy corpsmen rescued a 7-year-old Iraqi girl. She had been shot in the chest. The child was airlifted to a U.S. Navy ship in the Persian Gulf.
I feel compassion for some of these people that we bring back, and I think everybody does, whether they're prisoners of war, when they're you know, they're in the back screaming for help and pain. It doesn't matter. You as a human want to help that person.
And thus far, there have been no shortage of patience. With the U.S. Marines, Byron Pitts, CBS News in Iraq.
Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, a plane full of passengers from Asia quarantined in California. The latest mystery virus scare as cases multiply. American Airlines is about to jettison 20% of its pilots. 2,500 will lose their jobs as part of the concession package their union agreed to help American avoid bankruptcy. After a 4-session sell-off on Wall Street, bargain hunters moved in today and set off a modest rally. The Dow gained 77 points, the Nasdaq 7. The death toll from a mystery virus known as SARS is still rising. More than 60 now, including 2 new deaths in North America. Health officials around the world also imposed new quarantines, even holding up a plane load of international passengers in San Jose, California. Medical correspondent Elizabeth Callerton has more about this on the CBS Health Watch.
All it took was complaints of coughs among 5 people on board this American Airlines jet arriving in the United States from Tokyo, and it was grounded on the tarmac and surrounded by ambulances. Public health officials were rushed to the scene.
After arrival at the airport, the persons who were reported to be symptomatic were escorted off the plane by paramedics.
3 passengers were removed from the plane and are now in hospital isolation. The rest were eventually cleared to go home and warned to be on the lookout for flu-like symptoms.
Each person on the plane, as they were deplaning, was given a copy of the CDC's travel alert that is given to every person coming back from mainland China or Hong Kong.
Air travel is the main culprit in the swift international spread of the new SARS virus, which so far cannot be identified and has no treatment. Because several people on board had been in Hong Kong, where the disease is spreading at an alarming rate, American health officials took no chances. Isolating the jet was standard operating procedure, according to the Centers for Disease Control, which says this isn't the first time it's happened since the SARS investigation started.
Here in the United States, we are able to recognize cases in travelers as they arrive, and we're working very quickly to take care of those people and implement the measures that will help prevent spread.
So far, suspected SARS cases have been seen in 26 states. California and New York have the heaviest caseloads, and there are no deaths. In Toronto, Canada, site of the largest outbreak outside Asia, 2 more deaths were reported today. Doctors still think that SARS, which stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, is mainly spread through close face-to-face contact, and that the incubation period is about 10 days. That means only people sitting closest to the coughing passengers on the plane are at highest risk. But it also means that people who are exposed on the plane are already back in their communities and may not come down with any symptoms for days. Dan?
Elizabeth Caledon, thanks. The FBI says it is now on the lookout for a female al-Qaeda operative, in fact operatives, who may have been recruited for terror attacks. For example, the Bureau has issued a global alert for 31-year-old Afiya Siddiqui, a Pakistani who earned a PhD in neuroscience from the United States MIT. She's lived in Boston and recently visited the Maryland suburbs. Still ahead now on the CBS Evening News, mass marches outside the U.S. Supreme Court, while inside, Supreme Court justices hear arguments in a landmark affirmative action case. Affirmative action is a deeply felt issue in this country and the cause of some racial tensions. It has wide implications, so wide and deep, the U.S. Supreme Court took the rare step of releasing an audio recording of today's oral arguments as the justices revisited the issue. CBS's Wyatt Andrews reports on a case that could deeply affect college admissions and a lot more.
For the first time since the 70s, the Supreme Court today took affirmative action in education dead on. Can race be a factor in college admissions, period? Two white females say the University of Michigan denied them admission using tough standards for whites, but then, in the name of diversity, admitted minorities who had lower grades and scores.
But the University of Michigan's admissions process is not fair and is not equal. They give 20 points explicitly for skin color.
The university admits to the double standard, but argues that a diverse class benefits everyone, including whites. Today's arguments were recorded and released by the court.
Students will see a range of ideas, a range of viewpoints. The benefits from this affect every single student that comes through.
But the Bush administration argued against preferences based on race.
It's a thinly disguised quota which sets aside a significant portion of each year's entering class.
Justice Scalia also questioned why Michigan needed what it called a critical mass of minorities.
Once you use the term critical mass, and you're into quota land.
No, Your Honor, if it were a fixed range that said that it will be a minimum of 8%, come hell or high water, that would be a quota. But that is not what occurred here.
For the thousands of protesters who came outside the Supreme Court in support of affirmative action, this case is not about the legal fine points of quotas. This is about the future of race in America. Some of America's largest companies and most prominent retired generals have filed arguments calling race-based admissions critical to business and to the military. The court has to decide if that meets the Constitution's call for equal protection. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
Citing concern over possible racial bias, a judge today recommended dozens of drug convictions in Tulia, Texas, be set aside. All the cases were based on the work of this single undercover agent in 1999. The 46 people arrested said they were falsely accused and said they were targeted just because they are of African American heritage. The judge today agreed with them and recommended an appeals court grant new trials to everyone convicted. Just ahead on the CBS Evening News, ties that bind, fathers and sons, duty, honor, country, and war. In war, you depend on the people around you. You share stories, trenches, bravery, and pain. Tonight, CBS's Bob McNamara introduces you to people who share all that and more.
Tennessee reservists train on Fort Campbell's mock battlefield, one of hundreds of units in the next wave to go to war. The difference is this brigade has 7 fathers and sons.
Kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience, I guess. Going and also with your father beside you.
Part of a Chattanooga missile launching unit ready to be deployed any day.
You're a hero.
Jeb Kittle got out of the Army last summer, but signed on with his dad James's reserve battalion so they could serve together.
I didn't want him having all the fun, I guess. Everyone feels confident complete the mission and bring everybody back alive.
Even if you don't have no finance problems, you still need to go through finance.
Finances aside, going to war is taking life into account. But Sergeant Mike Ellis, on the left, always wanted to be in his father Jasper's unit, despite a kind of double jeopardy.
We hope for the best, that we come back together.
That's our goal. That's our goal, is to come back. Be safe and come back.
None of these father-son National Guardsmen are assigned to fight side by side. But Jeff Mullins could be closer to his dad than just a picture in a wallet.
We'll take care of each other. I done told my wife I'll give my life before, you know, anything happens to him. So he'll get me tear-eyed there.
USA! USA!
Today, as Homefront rallies continue to support their sons and daughters and husbands and wives at war, not to be forgotten are 7 families who will soon be making twice the sacrifice. Bob McNamara, CBS News, Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
And that's part of our world. Dan Rather, thanking you for choosing the CBS Evening News. We invite you back tomorrow. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, log on to cbsnews.com. American troops on the road to Baghdad. Up-to-the-minute coverage tomorrow. Experience CBS News.